Good
Sorry if
morning.
the dog.
Oh, you are
Morning.
fine. Brooklyn is Brooklyn is not here, so you won't hear her, but normally she'll do something, or I think I've had to stop and get her from doing something because it's Brooklyn. She's just gonna do whatever.
Okay, I
Good.
just froze. Okay. Mine's freezing up for some reason, Joel.
Okay, I think you're okay. You're fine on my side, so we'll go with it. Good morning, good afternoon. I am going to give it a few minutes to see if we have some folks to join this morning. It is Sunday, April the 9th. It is 9 a.m. Pacific, Lynn Phoenix time, and 12 my time. So I know this is a busy Sunday for a lot of folks, so we'll wait and see if we have people to join. And if not, we'll go ahead and get started with our conversation. Okay, I see a thumbs up. Somebody's here. Good morning. Thank you for being here. We'll give it a few more minutes. Let's see. And Lynn, thank you for getting up early to be with me this morning. I
Oh,
appreciate
thank
you.
you, Joel, for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am excited to have you. All right, there's another thumbs up. We're going to give it just a couple more minutes, and then I'll go ahead and get started with the intro, and we'll do our thing. All right, so I know we got some eyes out there. Good afternoon from Baltimore. All right, thank you for being here. Happy Sunday
Woo,
to you.
my hometown.
All
Yay.
right. Happy you are here. Okay, I am going to kick us off and get us started so we can get into this conversation that I am looking forward to. And I am going to um, do my intro. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Jewel Pearson, and this is Miss Bohemian Soul TV. This is the Creating Home, a Tiny House series, and this segment that we are going to get into today is one of the conversations on intimate spaces. Every Sunday, I offer live content. I alternate between these conversations and the What's Your Question series, where I answer frequently asked tiny home questions. And to introduce myself, I'd like to say I built a kind of fancy tiny house in 2015. And since that time, I have shared my journey to hopefully inspire others who are interested in the movement. I offer coaching and consultations to help others in their tiny house journey. And you will be able to find links to schedule a session with me in the video description for this video once it goes live. And along the way, I try to serve up a lot of representation. I want us to be able to see ourselves in this movement. It is my intent to build figurative and literal community that is inclusive and accessible. And if you find this information and the video helpful, I hope that you will like it, you'll share it, you'll subscribe to the channel, and then also turn on the notifications so that you'll know when content is live and available. And so let me do that again. All right, we're up. Here we go. There we are. It's always a challenge for me. So with this service, I'm gonna figure it out one day. I'm gonna be a real professional. So I like to say with this series that I believe our homes tell a story about us, whether it's intentional or not, or unintentional. But I do tend to think that with tiny houses and the journey to tiny homes, that it there is a lot of intent within the journey with people living in tiny homes, with people who build tiny homes, in their decisions to get there, their design, all of that. And so that is what we explore in these conversations. And I feel like it's a whole lot bigger than just the tiny house. It's bigger than the aesthetics, the pillows, that kind of stuff. There is usually a story behind the journey to tiny, and that is what we will explore today. So before we get started, Lynn, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself to the audience this morning.
Oh, thank you, Joel. And first of all, thank you for allowing me to join and
Absolutely.
talk to you about just anything tiny house and our experience together and how we met is going to be interesting. But my name is Lynn Edley, and I am originally from Maryland. So shout out to my sister from Baltimore. Thank you for joining. And so I was born and raised in Maryland. My father was a lieutenant colonel in the military, and then we moved to the suburbs. But 10 years ago, I moved to Arizona. My husband was ready to retire, and we wanted to get in on the housing market that was depressed at the time, but a good opportunity to get in. So we moved here 10 years ago. And through that journey, I was concerned because I thought we're landlocked in the desert, and is there any nature opportunities? Where's the water, in
Okay.
Arizona? So we'll talk about that. But my background is in telecommunications. I was in fiber optics technology. And then when we moved to Arizona, I was focusing more on real estate investments. So I did some fix and flips, um, one for myself. We stayed 2 years and then flipped it. And then I did just one, just surely, purely for investment. And also, I built a house with my husband in Maryland. We subcontracted it, but I designed it. So I had some background in it, but I was really interested in the tiny house movement when I saw your show and all the
Oh,
beautiful
so
tiny
wait a minute.
homes.
You went out for just a second. You said you were interested in tiny houses. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was interested in tiny houses when I saw your show.
Oh, okay,
Back
okay.
when all the shows were going on, that kind of what piqued my interest about tiny homes. But it was just, I was admiring all those from afar that were entering the movement, and you were one of the rare ones that I saw. Hey, she's African American and she's stepping into, and I was really interested to see that.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm glad that it's always interesting to me to get to meet people who I run into people and there's like, "Oh, I saw your show and your show was the one that let me know that this movement was for us." And so it's always a beautiful thing to me to see the impact that show had and seeing me there had on our community. And that's one of the things that I want to keep with this work, keep showing us here in the movement and inspiring others. So so talk a little bit about, so you're in telecommunications, you're in Arizona, you've done the real estate. Like, what was the reasoning for you behind going from traditional housing, real estate to an actual tiny house? What was that transition for you?
Well, and like I said, I was looking kind of from afar, admiring those that were already doing it. But really, what inspired me was I tried to go on a camping trip with my millennial kids. I know it sounds so, there was no big major moment. It was, I tried to go camping. They were up at one of the beautiful parks and lakes Arizona has here, but there was no cell signal and a storm had blown in. And I said to my husband, honey, I'm going to go check on the kids because wherever they are, a big storm came in. I just want to make sure they were okay. So I show up, and first of all, I was just the breathtaking scenery really hit me first. There was like a dense cloud cover over the lake. There was a rainbow coming out, and I was taken with it and started taking pictures. Um, but as night fell, the whole experience went south. It got buggy, and I started feeling icky, and I'm looking. There's something jumping out of the bushes, and I'm like, I just wasn't comfortable. I didn't feel safe. And so I banished myself to my SUV where I woke up with a backache. And I had to go to the bathroom at some point, but there was no way I was going to get out of the car because my nephew had made a stew, but the coyotes were running through the camp. I was scared. And I thought when I left, gosh, this would have been nice. My millennial kids still want to hang out with their mom. It's a beautiful scene, but I just can't hack this camping. If I
Okay.
just had a tiny house, if I just had a tiny house at the lake for my family,
Very.
I honestly, that is what put it on then it moved to the bucket list. It still wasn't something I was going to jump out and do, but it was on the bucket list.
Okay. All right. That's a very interesting story. So it wasn't necessarily like, so for me, like my retirement plan, my downsizing, yours was really, I want to camp, but I need a glamping experience. I want to do this, but I want to do it fancy, which it was the inspiration. And that has been the journey that you're on. And as we share pictures and talk a little bit further, that I haven't hadn't heard that story from you, so it's interesting how that came together to inspire the work that you've done and what you're doing now. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. Um, so then you also had, and I'll start sharing the picture. So I know the first picture that we're going to share is your husband. So I don't know if you want to kind of give us some background that what ended up transpiring later on as you moved forward.
Well, like you said, I was looking at this more in the vacation zone, but you never know how things end up manifesting themselves. So my husband and I moved here in 2012, and this is a picture of him and our dog Murphy. And we had rented a pontoon, and we were zipping across Lake Pleasant, one of my favorite places. And this was a place where we found peace, and he was retired, and it just so represents his freedom after working so hard. We worked for the phone company, and we had blue collar jobs. We were not managers. He was out there in a bucket climbing a pole, and so was I at one point.
Oh
I
wow.
left the office. Yeah, I left the office because I'm like, you're making good money. I want that money. We got to send these kids to college, right? And so
Yeah.
he took me out to the he took me out to the backyard pole and taught me how to climb, because that's how they kept a lot of women out of those jobs back then. Was you had to pass this pole climbing class with gaffs on your feet and bang in a J hook and lift heavy bucket of tools, and they could keep women out by doing that because we
Oh
couldn't
wow.
didn't have the physical strength to do it. Yeah, but he trained me, and I was the only woman in my training class to pass, and I went out as a technician, which I loved, because then I was out free and, working on the circuitry of fiber optics. And so I just learned so much from this man. But unfortunately, in 2020, he passed away. My husband had chronic kidney disease, and we waited for a really long time for him to get a kidney. And we were so happy when he got, but then unfortunately, a year later, it failed.
Oh,
And
okay.
that happened right in the middle of the pandemic, unfortunately.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Very sorry to hear that.
So yeah. So just as a brief, just to wrap that up,
Oh,
I mean,
sorry.
certainly traumatizing because, you could get the services you needed, but, so my goal then is, okay, I need to find peace and healing from this grief. And that's where the tiny house came back up into my mind. So that here's another reason why I wanted to build it. So I started with trying to design, what do I want? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just started putting some things down on paper. I got a little CAD program for free and just started, just sketching up some ideas from things I saw on the internet. And this is a
Yeah.
picture of one of my early design schematics for the plans.
All right. And then you started
Okay.
moving ahead.
Well, let me tell you what made me move ahead. So, I went from bucket list to I need some peace and restoration. And, so I need to do something to where do I put this grief to 3 months later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I know this sounds like a horrific story, but everybody has a story. We all have one. And
Right. Absolutely.
a wise woman once told me, everybody has a story. It's whether you can make it through your story. And so this is my process of trying to make it through my story. Look, I got the cancer early. I'm going through radiation, but that is when I said, okay, I'm going to start building, because I didn't know how much time I had really at one
Right.
point. I
Right.
said, this bucket list just became a priority, and it's now or never, and I'm going to build this. So here's my trailer. We started. I went out and found a builder that could work with my budget. We did run into some troubles with the builder, which we'll talk about because I want to educate people on that. But this was the trailer when we first started. That's how it looked. And those are
Yeah.
tanks underneath. Yep, tanks
Yep.
underneath.
So two things I want to talk about. So we'll talk about the tanks in just a minute because I do want to point that out. But the one of the things that I want to touch on that you mentioned was how, where you said it sounds like a horrific story, but there was really some beauty in it as you were deciding this, I'm still moving ahead and I'm gonna beat this. I often talk about dreams and following your dreams and how it's not always just an easy process. Like there's some challenges, there's some failure, there's some mistakes along the way, and all of those things that can really set you off course if you allow it. Or you can decide, okay, I'm going to learn for this or from this, or I'm going to beat this, or I'm going to, figure out a new way to get to the end goal, but you just don't allow it to, you know, throw you off track completely. And I think it's important to call out, and that is exactly what you were just speaking to.
Exactly, Jewel. And what I realized is it really took the breast cancer for me to really pull the trigger. So it was always on the bucket list.
Hmm.
But it took me feeling like it's now or never. I called my
Right.
son and I said, he's got a degree in business. I said, what do you think about this, Mom? He said, Mom, just build one, the rest will come. He knew I wanted it. And he said, we support you. So I did reach out to family and got that family support. And I started my process. Yep.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I want to point out here on the trailer, so everybody, so I always talk about, like, in the what's your question, the importance of starting with a great foundation. And so tiny houses on wheels are built on tiny house trailers, custom tiny house trailers. Some people will get a used trailer and try to refabricate it and do all of those things to save some money. What people who have done that end up saying, usually at the end of it, is that it would have been, between the time, the money, and the effort it took to restore it, they probably would have done better just buying a custom trailer outright. And so where my trailer is similar to this, though. I have a triple axle trailer. My trailer has a bottom underneath, where I had my fabricator customize a bottom to the trailer because I was worried about the underbody of it. But one of the neat things that you've done, and we talked about this when I was out, and I'll talk about my visit, was the fact that you have your tanks underneath you. So your water tank, and one of these is one of these the black water tank, or
So
both
I
fresh water.
I have the urine separating toilet, and we'll talk about that. But
Okay, okay,
so I don't have any
it,
solid waste in my tank.
okay, okay.
Um,
All right,
so
but
the two black tanks, what I'm using them for is one is for kitchen water and bathroom water. So I want, even if it's considered gray water, it's going into the
mm-hmm,
black tank. Okay,
okay,
and then I do have the other black tank is just to hold urine. That's in the far back. I don't know if the picture shows it. Back
yes,
you'll see it
yes,
in the back. And then the two gray tanks are to hold just shower water. So this is just water that's coming from the shower because I can use that and reclaim it and I don't know, wash my
absolutely,
tires or whatever,
absolutely.
So
Water,
yeah.
non-edible plants, absolutely. And so a point of this is that it's taking these tanks outside of the house. So because sometimes, people have tanks within the wheel well or under a sofa. You're taking out space from the inside of the bill to have holding tanks. And so this is an option for it. Now, obviously, you have to be careful to ensure that they're sturdy tanks, because something could potentially puncture it if you're on, low, you're traveling something where you have rocks, you're on low ground, or over a surface that's higher than normal. You want to be sure that you're investing in some good tanks that are
Right.
designed for this.
Yeah. And I also, Jewel, just to give your listeners a tip, is I tried to find the thinnest tanks I could find. So that made
Absolutely.
them wider, but they were
Right.
thinner, so they could stay
Absolutely.
within the compounds. Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, so the build is happening. And so I kind of got it out of order, but that's the build happening. So for as far as your location, you were building at a kind of somewhat like I did, almost a storage facility, where you had negotiated space so that you would have the room to build.
I mean, initially, I was working with a builder, and when I went to
Oh,
meet him,
okay.
he had yeah, remember he had several tiny
Yes.
houses that were there, but when he fell into some financial trouble and left, then I contracted with the landowner to just subcontract my own build. So that's
Right.
another thing I do want to tell your listeners
Uh-oh.
is when you're thinking about who you want your builder to be, there's some little tips that you can use to make sure you're protected. And I use them. I mean, though found myself in this situation, there were some things I did that protected my investment, and we'll talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. All right, so the build is progressing. So to kind of step back, so I had the opportunity. I was traveling in Phoenix in 2021, and had the opportunity to connect with Lynn. And so this is a picture from my trip out there. We actually did some sightseeing around Arizona, and then we stumbled on this little. Was this what was this a hotel type area? I can't remember exactly what
Yeah,
they
it
were
was a
doing with the
tiny
tiny
house.
houses there.
Yeah, it was a tiny house hotel, and we were just kind of looking at how they had put that together. I believe it was up in like the Verde area. We were kind of looking at how much better it would have been if we had done it, but yeah, we were just kind of just surveying all the different tiny houses in the area and what they were doing. But let me
Yeah.
just say this. What I want to bring out is that you and I did not know each other. Other than me seeing you on the show, I hadn't followed you at the time. You had no, I was just, you didn't know who I was. And you don't know this, but at the time you showed up on that lot when we met, my builder had just left. And the words that you gave me to encourage me to move forward. Now, I had done some construction projects, like I said before, in Maryland and my real estate experience, and I knew I could do this, but I was literally going through radiation and I was a little bit broken down with the build, a little frustrated, and that happens. But you encouraged me, you can do this, Lynn. We talked about it in detail, some of the things that, I might want to consider, making sure I stay on budget, and that the imperfections, the one thing you said to me is the imperfections that you're concerned about, one day you will look at them and you will grow to love them because you will know that you did this. You
Yeah.
did this. And when Jules showed up at this lot, I believe I was making shutters.
Yeah.
And I was painting my shutters. And that is when I realized I didn't start out to build a replica of my child home, but that's what I was creating and didn't even know it. Didn't even know it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
So
don't know
thank
that
you.
I
Thank you.
included that picture. Absolutely, Lynn. That's one of the things as I talk about with the audience here. Um, and we'll talk vetting your builder, but you can still, like you were saying, you can still vet your builder and still run into challenges with the builder. And I think the thing is, again, pushing through, figuring out, a plan A, B, C, and D. How do you, if there's some things that you need to salvage, how do you salvage that? How do you move forward? How do you keep moving forward and not allow those challenges to completely defeat you? And the part where you were saying, where I reminded you about the imperfections, from personal experience, I don't know that I've shared this story recently, but my closet door, the wood that I have, the panel that I have for my closet door that has the Follow Your Dreams mural on it, I had purchased that panel and had it in the back of my truck during my build, and we were behind in the build, and the panel ended up being in my truck for longer than it should have because we were the build was behind. And by the time I went to use it, it was warped because I should have taken it out, maybe left it on site, but there was just so much going on during my build, and it was warped. And but I didn't have the funds at that time to replace it. It was like, okay, we got to go with this. It's warped, but I'm going to have to use it because my budget at that point had gotten so tight. There was no room for buying another panel. But to that point in the conversation that I had with you, Lynn, is that when it's kind of humid here is when I really noticed that the panel on my door is warped. And I could have replaced it 100 times over now, having been in my house for 8 years. But it is absolutely a reminder to me of my journey, of my struggle, of the hard times, the challenges, everything that I went through in my build. And I've shared that my build was very stressful. And it is a reminder that, here I am 8 years in living in my house. I'm on the other side of that. And it just is a reminder of how far you can come in a process, in a journey, and to remind you, to kind of keep moving forward.
That's so true, Jewel. And what I find amazing about what you said, it was kind of prophetic in a way because now when I'm up at the lake and I'm looking at just the little imperfections, you know, I actually have grown to love them because it reminds me of just th- that it actually gives me pride, you know, I'm just proud of it,
Yeah,
actually. You know, when I see
absolutely.
you instead of looking at it and going, "Oh, I wish I could have blah blah blah." You know, I'm looking at it with pride. You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely.
yeah. I'm glad you told
Absolutely.
me that because I was in the headspace of I had this utopia of what this house was going to be with the rooftop deck and all that. And when the budget hit, and I had to, you know, now pay a lot owner to continue to build my home, I had to rethink things. And I could have spent way too much money trying to build this utopia. But if I just accept the little things, the small
Right.
things, I could still have a beautiful home and really appreciate the work went into it. And I have limitations on what I can do, but at that point it was sweat equity. Whatever I
Yeah,
could do, I was putting it in. Yep.
absolutely. So this is we're kind of at getting we've gotten through the build. This is on location at the an area lake, right, Lynn?
That's right. That's the same lake that you saw the picture with my husband and my dog Murphy.
Okay. All right. And
So
so
we
let
finally
go ahead. I'm
done.
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was saying we finally get done, and the first place I want to go is back to that same lake because I'm still in my process, right? I'm still trying to make it through my story, and I just couldn't wait to get it up there. And let me tell you something: when we hit the campsite, so it's a developed campsite, so I can plug in. I have air conditioning, I have heat, I got hot water. They don't have sewers at these sites; they have electric and water, but I can so I have to catch all my water and go to a dump station when I'm done, but and drain the tank. But I'm telling you, when I hit that lake, I thought, oh my goodness, you have a house at the lake. And I
You
couldn't have
have.
afforded a house at the lake. I was on a budget, but I did
Yeah,
it. And that brings us back to the original dream. And this is a
absolutely.
picture of the inside. Yep.
That is
Here I'm
gorgeous. Yep.
finding my peace, processing my grief. And I really have to thank a childhood friend of mine. Her name is Gail, and we were the first or the only African American girls in our first grade class. And I was the only one until she came a month later. And that's what representation means. I mean, it goes back that deep and that far. When she walked into that classroom, this is my friend Gail.
Yeah.
Not only Oprah has a Gail, I have a Gail. Everybody needs a Gale. Like if I had a magic wand, it would be like you get a Gale and you get a Gale. But she helped me with this build. I called her and all those selections you saw in the house. She was so invested with me just over the phone. I can count on probably one hand how much we've been together in the last 25 years because she went her way. She was married. I was married. She was traveling the world. And but let me tell you something. She came 2 weeks ago for the first time. She lives in Florida. I live in Arizona. It's 47 years later, and we are there at our tiny house. And that's what she did. She cried. She cried
Yeah,
and she held
I'm
her arms
sure
up.
she did. That's beautiful.
These are my sisters, and these are my power women. My sisters that are behind me. They raised me. Unfortunately, my mom died of breast cancer when I was a teenager. She was diagnosed when I was 9 years old, and these two rolled my bassinet into the room. And my older sister, Evian, is very prissy, and she is very, very smart. She's a power woman. She worked in intelligence field in her career, and she probably was wearing pearls before she ever left high school. She was Miss Future Business Leader of America. And then my
Okay.
younger sister, our next sister, Cherie, she was the rough and tumble one with the camping pajamas on.
I see those
So she
camping
had
pajamas.
Right. My sister bought us both matching pajamas like that. So she out in the woods. We're sniffing sassafras and digging up and eating wild berries and lighting little campfires. One time she had me roasting chewing gum.
Oh wow.
We were doing the whole Huckleberry Finn raft thing. I mean, got dirty. We got tadpoles. And when I came home, Vion just said, "Look at you." And she cleaned my nails and did my hair. So this is the foundation of the
Of
women
who
I have
you
behind
are.
me. Yep,
Absolutely.
and when they
Absolutely.
when they complain about me, I tell them, "Look, you created this hot mess, so I don't want to hear
That's so funny.
it." But they
Let's,
gave me the confidence that I
uh-oh.
needed to step in
Uh-oh.
faith there, and do this build. And even like you, Joel, you're part of that sisterhood that when things go wrong, I really didn't want to turn to my family because I told my sister my builder left a lot. And when I went to pick her up, she had taken off her tennis shoes and was removing her earrings. I was like,
She,
okay,
she's ready to
wait a
go.
minute. Right, because this is her little sister, right? My older sister, you know, I just didn't want to do that to them. My sons are 6'2" and 6'4", didn't want to end up on the 5 o'clock news. So I said, I'm going to weather the storm by myself. But then God sent an angel, and that was you.
Well, I am happy that we were able to connect so I could encourage you along your journey. So
Definitely.
someone asked what are the dimensions of your home? Is your home's 24 footer, is that correct? Okay.
Right. I designed this. It was a 24-foot tiny home, but I have two storage closets. So one closet is for, all my camping equipment, and so that adds an additional about 2 feet. So it's really in all, it's 28. But the closets are used for my utilities. Your um, water heater. I have a air conditioning unit. My outdoor unit is stored on one end, and then the other end is storage for all of my camping equipment.
The external closet over the tongue. So here's a
Correct.
question that I asked. So let's talk about the glamping because you don't live in your tiny house at 100%. And I'm going to tell a funny story about that. You use your home for glamping. And so you rent your home out to people in the area who are interested in glamping. And so the funny thing is, I'll tell this story because when I was on site and she was building her home, and I knew her intent was for glamping, I told her then, I said, you're going to at some point develop an attachment to your home, and it's going to be harder for you to just use it for glamping and allow strangers to be in your house. And so I would like to know that was 2021, Octoberish of 2021. I'd like to know how true those words became for you.
Well, I'm starting to think you're a prophet, really.
What'd you say? What'd you say?
I'm starting to think you're really a prophet because you be calling these things out, you know what I mean? And then it happens. No, like I fell in love with my tiny house. I'm not even gonna lie. By the time I struggled to finish it, I fell in love with it, fell in love with the lake. So between me and my family, we are up there a lot. Even by myself with my pets. Half the Instagram photos are just me and them, right? Because I'm still trying to make it through my process. But what I do
Absolutely.
is I went to a tiny fest show in Scottsdale, and I really interested in people like the ones listening today who aren't sure if they want to do this, might want to know if 300 square feet or 250 square feet is doable for them. They
Hmm.
might want to just experience, hey, how is it set up? Where do you plug in? I've never seen one because if you go to the home show, you can see them, but you really don't have an opportunity to sleep in it and see if it's really what you want to do. That's who I'm targeting. So when I really get people who are interested in coming, I make time for them to experience it. I make time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me step back because someone in the chat asked what glamping meant. So glamping is a version of camping, but it's the glamorous side of it. So there's real camping where you're kind of back to basics and you're doing, you don't have AC and you might not have a toilet and you are at the real level of camping, like navigating the wild. Glamping is almost the bougie version of camping, and it's the glamorous side of it where you've got your amenities. You're out in the wilderness, but you also have your amenities. And if you heard her story in the beginning of the camping trip that failed, where she needed to use the restroom, she wasn't trying to be outside, she was in her car. That's how you end up glamping, because you're not really about that hard camping life. You want some of the amenities and some of the luxuries. And so that is what her tiny house build has afforded her, the opportunity for glamping, and having all of the amenities. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, it's Jewel. But I do want to say, I also wanted to harness in the camping side because when I talked to my friend, my best friend Gail, she's as bougie as they come. I'm not even gonna lie. But when I talked to her, we wanted the camping. We wanted roast s'mores. We wanted to build a fire. But when it gets buggy and it starts getting itchy and coyotes are running through your camp, I need the security of this house, right? So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm
right.
right there with you. So one of the questions that I asked Lynn, and I'm interested because we haven't really talked about this since my trip there. Do you see yourself now? I always ask this question: are you part of the tiny house community, or do you see yourself as part of the tiny house community, or do you just own a tiny house?
It's funny that you say that because I knew nothing about the community as a whole.
Hmm.
And I knew my purpose was not aligned with some people who need this for housing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But now I attended my first tiny house show, Tiny Fest in Scottsdale, and what I was so happy to see is I felt extremely welcomed. Over 300 people came in to look, and the community as a whole was my introduction really into it because I wasn't in really the movement. So, but what's happened is because of my situation with my husband passing away, I'm in a home that's way too large. And now guess what? I am considering moving down into a tiny house, of some sort. Now I do know from my glamping tiny house that that may be a bit too small for me long
Hmm.
term. I might need
Hmm.
maybe 500 square feet,
Hmm.
but I can use it during the build process, which is exciting. I've been checking into zoning laws, and I can certainly stay in it if I'm building something small for me to downsize in as I move forward. So yeah, now I'm in the community. I've met numerous people in the community, and because you blaze that trail, I felt pretty welcomed. I don't think I ran across some of the pushback you may have had initially, and I was happy to see a lot of diversity. So many women of color came up to me in my house and said, "You did this," and I said, "And you can do it too, and you can do it too."
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the questions was, how many people does your tiny house accommodate? How many people can your house accommodate?
Okay, so my tiny house has two sleeping lofts, and they each have a Lynn Spa queen size mattress. So you will be sleeping in comfort. And then downstairs, I have a bench that's kind of functions more like a sofa if you're watching TV, but that actually slides out to a queen size frame. So it's off the ground, it slides out. And then I have a queen size comfortable air mattress that you can blow up because we're camping, right? We're glamping. So it can sleep five comfortably. I mean, three queens can sleep six, but that's tight in a tiny house. So I always say generally five. There'll be either two couples in each loft or kids in the loft. And then if someone has disability issues, you do have to make it up the initial three steps to get into the trailer. There is a lower level option there for someone to sleep. And so that's been very accommodating for larger families. Yep. But so it sleeps
Yeah,
five comfortably, I would say.
perfect. Okay, and so I see a question in and it's a kind of a side question, asking, are there tiny houses designed for infants and toddlers in mind? Absolutely. A tiny house is about your design and your needs. So going into it, knowing what it is that you need from that tiny house, you can absolutely design it to accommodate whatever it is that you need. So, Lynn, when people see your home, um, and this is one of my usual questions, and the work that you're doing around glamping and the awareness that you're working on, what is it that you want people to see, or to what does your home say about you as a person when people see your home and the work that you're doing?
I mean, what I hope they see is this is a place for recuperation. This is a place for rest and relaxation because that's the healing place that it's been for me. I went through something extremely traumatic, and it's been so healing to be amongst nature, looking at the lake. these are, look, some people like shopping. You can run your credit card up if you want, but I like the sunrise, the sunset.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I mean? Look at
yeah,
there are African donkeys running through this park where they were once the descendants of coal mining donkeys that had been brought here that are running wild and free and thriving, and they
yeah.
have babies. So I apologize for all my donkey pictures on my Instagram page, but I am fascinated. We have bald eagles. We're surrounded by nature, and that is peaceful to me. It's the things God gave us, right? And
Yeah,
it's healing, and that's what I'm trying to invoke. And when I have one come that wants to experience it, I'm hoping that they feel restored because that's what my friend Gail came for. She didn't just come to see it, and she cried not just because she was proud of us and proud of me. She cried because she needed to be restored.
yeah,
Since the pandemic, women in this country have taken care of children. They've been teacher, mother, we and men too. I mean, everybody collectively has been through a lot. And I think we have this move on mentality and we forget to stop and realize we need that recuperation and rest. And I am going to say this public service announcement. I always have to say it and I apologize, but the women who have not gotten their mammogram because you were so busy taking care of everybody else, go get your mammogram. It can save your life. And I just want to throw that in there. I am an advocate for breast cancer awareness. I partnered with MD Anderson Cancer Center to bring awareness to so many women that had just skipped it because we were afraid to, be in the presence of someone so close in your face. We've all had that experience, but we got to get back in there now. So even my
absolutely.
nurses my nurses that were taking care of people through the pandemic, just imagine if they could just go to my tiny house and get some restoration and rest and peace after watching so many people suffer. So that's what I wanted to invoke.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And so people who are in the comments and asking about her contact information, I always provide that in the video description. So you'll at the end of this conversation, I'll give her an opportunity to share her information out loud, and then that information will also be in the video description. So just bear with us. So Lynn, you talked about this a little bit, but let's just kind of expand on it some more. Through this journey, what have you learned about yourself in this journey? What has this journey taught you?
Number one, that I'm stronger than I think I am.
Mm,
Always. I always underestimate myself. I know I'm strong,
mm-hmm,
but sometimes I doubt myself. And this is what I want to share with women. When you are walking through a space, and this has been the story of my life, and someone makes you feel like you're not welcome,
mm-hmm,
they try to shake your confidence.
mm-hmm.
And usually that person is failing. So in my case, my builder was failing, but he tried to shake my confidence, right, in what I could do. And I think sometimes when you run across those type of negative people in your life, you just need to learn how to pivot. You know how to navigate it. And if I really think about it, what I learned is if I take my experiences from childhood, when my best friend and I were two of the only African American little girls in the class, and how we
Yeah,
felt in the vitriol we felt from some teachers and all of that, it was always about being in a room where sometimes people weren't there to support you. And how do you navigate that? How do you pivot from that? And I think part of it with this particular builder, and I wanted to circle back on that, is do your
absolutely.
research. I had done my research on this builder. I did see some problematic things, so I knew there was a red flag there. But because I was on a budget, I said, I think I can manage this. And I don't know about the trailer, part of the build. And he was building 5 or 6 other houses up there. So I said, but what I did is I went to him, I said, I see some undesirable business things in your past. Can I pay you as a consultant? And I said, and what I'll do is I'll use your trades. Just give me the price. But I would like to pay them directly. I want to make sure they get paid.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Would you
mm-hmm.
work with me under that arrangement? And thank God I did, because everybody up there who handed him 50, $60,000, whatever, that was it. Their money was gone. And I still had my money to hire the trades to continue my build. So
To
even
keep
though
you
I
working.
ended up with a right, I ended up with a builder that, kind of rolled out, I still had protected myself, in researching him ahead of time. Do your research. Of course, if I had the money, I would have gone to some fancy builder and built, my perfect tiny home. I was on a budget, and that's why I did it that way. So that's my advice to women. And don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong in a room or try to shake your confidence because you have it within you to do it. And that's the encouragement I want to give anyone that's thinking about doing that. Jewel is a resource to you. You don't have to blaze the trail and mow it down like she had to. And I'm a
Set it on
resource to
fire.
you. Right. And she was my resource. And see how it builds? Now I'm a resource. You want to move to Arizona? You don't know what's friendly for zoning for tiny houses? You don't know where to get started? Email me. Jewel will give you the information. I respond and try to point people in the right direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, And again, that's the point of these conversations. One, so we see ourselves in this movement, and also to be resources so that people who are trying to follow along don't have to reinvent the wheel, but they can learn something from these conversations. And this is my free contribution to to this work, because I do offer, paid consultations, but this is the free work that I do so that people have time to be in community and see other people's journey and ask questions and hear the story to hopefully inspire them. One of the things that I want you to talk a little bit more about, because I know I know that you have a very strong um mindset, ethic, not exactly sure of what the right word is, around wealth building. I know the work that you're doing, as you do, you're doing a lot in saving and numbers and all of those things. And as you do it, you have your kids in mind for future. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I always want to touch on the benefit for simple living, downsizing, tiny homes, how that can help in that area. And so, can I ask you to talk a little bit about that?
Right. Now, whether you're looking to build a tiny home just to live in and you want to do the sustainable, especially like in Arizona, we have 300 days of sun. If you can't figure out how to do solar power and live sustainable here, I don't know where you can, right? But whatever your reason, you might be someone who just wants, like me, a vacation home that's now out of reach, right? Whatever your investment strategy is, and that was where I was thinking about it. I think that what I like about the tiny home movement, it's an affordable entry place. It's an affordable entry place for whether you want to live in one, whether you want one as a vacation home. Um, for my children, I've thought about, expanding this and giving people other opportunities on a much larger scale. So I'm in the works with that. But for my children, I certainly want to leave a legacy. Nothing made me more proud I have two sons and a stepdaughter, and nothing made me more proud than when I had this idea, they were all on board with me. My daughter's an architect major, my son's has an MBA, and he bought his first home at 23 years old, following his mother. So what you do does give an example to your children, and
Hmm.
so that legacy is important to me in making sure they're using wise decisions and making wise investments. And real estate to me has always been a very, very wise investment. You're owning a piece of the earth, right? If you can buy some land. But I do recommend that you get a real estate agent you can trust. Because as I search for land all over on where I want to put my tiny house in the future, my agent, Nancy Perry, which is another like sisterhood type thing. She's bought or sold 8 or 9 properties for us. Um, she has picked me up. I probably owe her a front end alignment because she has driven down some rough trails to take me to see land. But get someone experienced that can help you navigate the zoning and help you navigate, what type of parcel, make sure it's not in a flood zone. So if you're going to dabble into real estate, you want to have yourself a good agent. If you come to Arizona, Nancy is the best, Nancy Perry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I'm going to step back to a comment that I see. It goes back to a conversation, part of the conversation a few minutes ago. There's a comment in there that says tiny home communities accept everyone, and I need to speak to that. Little Ridge Farm is has made that comment. I don't know if you're new to the space, but part of the reason that we're having this conversation as Black people, people of color, is that tiny home communities aren't always accepting of everyone. There are some challenges within tiny home communities. There's racism within the tiny home community. The areas that are accepting of tiny homes most of the time are rural areas and RV parks. And I have shared my own journey of having to relocate my home from a RV park because of racism. I've had to relocate my home from a rural area because of racism, where someone was later arrested for racial intimidation. So and I have been in this community for 8 years, and one of the things that got me started kind of on the path that I am on is the conversations around tiny homes and the leaders in the movement early on were challenging the status quo of housing. In my mind, if we're challenging the status quo of housing, that should include conversations of the unhoused who need housing. It should also include conversations of Black people and people of color who are year after year remain at the bottom of the list for conventional home ownership. But there was so much pushback as I was trying to get people in the community to be inclusive, and pushed back to the point of I actually received an anonymous threatening a threatening email that I was kind of pushing the limits. So there is a facade of everyone is welcome, but then when you open the door, the facade, the tiny house movement portrays itself to be very white, of a young white hipster movement. And that is the reason why these conversations are necessary, because our journey in this world, our journey in the tiny house community is different. And that is something that has to be recognized and acknowledged. And it is a very strong, something that I feel very passionate about because of what my journey has been. And I want to alleviate, I can't eliminate that for others, but I do want to alleviate some of the surprise. I also want to provide opportunity of awareness so that allies can be aware and they can help and be better people and help others be better people. And then for our community, we can be in this community and we can have some awareness and we can understand what our challenges are going to be, because the number one challenge within the tiny house community is where can you place a tiny house? And that becomes an even harder challenge for people of color and Black people, because it is, where can I place a tiny house so that I'm also safe? And so that is the work that I do here, and that is important. And I wanted to call it out.
And I
So
do want to say something about that, Jewel, because I ran into that experience myself. So even when I go to the parks and lakes, traditionally, I'm the only tiny house. Now they accept tiny houses here, but I'm the only one. And, for the most part, people have been welcoming. But I have run into similar circumstances where I didn't feel welcomed, in
mhm,
that space. I think camping and the outdoorsy
mhm,
things
mhm.
and being, I think people of color are just kind of entering that space, to tell you the truth. I'm so proud to see that we're actually out in nature and having these experiences. But you're right; it hasn't always been so inclusive. Like I was, you're at the lake, and I'm looking at the beautiful scene, and the next thing I see flying next to me is a "Let's Go Brandon" flag. And there was a woman whose son was autistic, and he thought those flags were him. He thought they were saying, "Yay." He was so happy. He said, "Everybody's cheering me here," because they were the only Black family in an RV park. And she turned that into something positive. She took the Let's Go Brandon and wrote a book that Brandon finds his sign. And she went on to publish this book and partner with the NASCAR driver who, like you talk about the allies, who was so hurt that his message had been stepped on, his name had been stepped on. And he
Mhm.
partnered with her and turned that message into something positive and where he could feel inclusive in this RV park. So what you're saying is absolutely true. And I think it's important that we talk about it. But what I'm excited about is most of the people that I was there with were very positive and uplifting, but I did run into the same thing. So I have to be honest
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, it is a safety issue. In Little Ridge Farm, I see you saying that you know people of color in tiny home communities and they love it there. I'm not saying it's not
Oh,
possible.
sure. No,
What I'm
no.
saying, and I'm not saying that there aren't some people who are in communities and they are black people or people of color in communities and they love it there. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there is racism. There is always going to be passive aggressive things that happen, even in places where you, for the most part, you feel safe there. This is a conversation that is necessary for our community, and we're going to have that conversation so that that people are aware that of the challenges and they can manage for their safety because at the end of the day, safety is very important. So
You're right. Jewel,
I didn't want to get off on that.
no, it's okay. I'm glad you brought it up because it's sometimes things that we cringe and don't want to say it, but it's again, it's feeling like you don't belong in a place, and that's all. I'm not saying the majority of it is like that.
Absolutely,
There
we
is,
haven't said that,
as
but
I've noticed, right, as I've noticed entering into spaces, especially RV parks, I have, I have had some experiences where I didn't feel as welcomed either. So it's we're not making it up, right? So
absolutely not. I wish that
yeah,
we were. Absolutely, honestly, I wish that we were.
I know.
Um, Question for you: microaggression. Thank you so much. That was the word that I could not get out of my brain. But that's exactly what I was trying to say. Microaggressions, even in places that are supposed to be safe places, microaggressions happen. And so, I mean, it's all day, every day for us to process these microaggressions. And I've stopped calling them microaggressions. They're aggressions because by the time they pile up, it is a lot to deal with. So thank you for that word because that's exactly what I was trying to say. Thank you. You knew I was trying to get that word. So, Lynn, one of the questions that I always ask is, um, what would you're in this journey? You've been here. You're almost 2 years in, right? Yeah, almost 2 years in.
Mhm.
What would be the title of your autobiography?
Mm. It would be called Murphy's Law.
That's beautiful because there's a connection, a personal connection to the Murphy for you, right?
Murphy is my Murphy's the dog that we rescued that rescued us.
Yeah.
I'm an
Okay.
avid dog lover. And yeah, if I had to write an autobiography, yeah, Murphy's Law, no doubt, because whatever can go wrong will go wrong in your life. But God will send you an angel when you are down and out and you don't know where to go, don't know what to do, don't know where to turn. We've all had those moments. And truly, Jewel, you were that angel for me to lift me up at the time when I was going through radiation trying to finish my tiny house. But Murphy's Law doesn't mean that whatever can go wrong will go wrong. Identify who the angels have been in your life because they just come in and leave and they kind of get you right back on your path. And a lot of people don't realize when one has come around. So I think we need to acknowledge those angels, the people who come in and just kind of help you pick things up and keep the ball moving. Um, and so that's the beauty of it. Murphy's Law doesn't have to consume your life. And you never know, it might be just a little dog that you rescued that's a mix, just a little mutt, and he saved us. We didn't rescue him. He saved us because now my husband's gone, his best friend, but he's still here to comfort me. Now, isn't that amazing?
Yeah. 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 That's beautiful. That's I love that. What else? What are some what's one question or one or two questions that I didn't ask that you wish I had or something that you wanted to talk about that I haven't touched on that you'd like to share this morning?
I mean, you touched on it all, Jewel. I just mainly want to tell people that if you're thinking of moving into this space, the number one question that I is they really haven't made a decision on whether they want to put a house on a foundation or have it on wheels in an RV park, like the gentleman was speaking of. So I think that's your first decision, because what's wonderful is there's municipalities and counties now that are allowing tiny houses on wheels. You can have your acre of land and put your house on there, and you don't have to live in an RV park, right? So I think the first decision you can make if you're thinking about doing this is, how do you want to be mobile or do you want it to be stationary? And once you do that, your location, you check with your local zoning. And those are the types of questions that I'm happy to help answer. If you don't know where to, where to go, I can point you in the right direction. And I want to be that angel for somebody else. So I'm here to help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So a question is about budgets and pricing for a tiny house, similar to yours. And so I'll preface that with, I only ask people to share what they're comfortable with sharing. If you're not comfortable with sharing the financial details, absolutely don't. But one of the other things that I want to share is budgets and pricing. And I just did, I think it was last week or the week before. What's your question? I did a whole segment on budgets and pricing because there's so many things to factor in budgets and pricing. Your location compared to where Lynn is located is going to impact the budget because unless you're in the same area because lumber costs can be different in a certain area. Access to certain materials is going to be different in a certain area, and that can impact the budget. So it's never a one for one scenario. So there are a lot of factors that you need to consider when you're putting together a budget, and trying to compare your bill to somebody else's. So I want to preface this answer with that. Um, and then the other thing I want to say is, um, building code, zoning, all of that is determined by city and county. It is going to be different by each city and county. It is not statewide, it is city and county. So you'll have to determine what the rules are in your specific area, for a tiny house. And so now let's go back, Lynn. I don't know if you're comfortable with sharing any information around your budget and the cost for your tiny house built. Completely up to you.
Oh no, listen, I'm about sharing because if I don't share, then nobody's going to learn, right? Now, I subcontracted because I was on a tight, tight budget. Wasn't going to blow the savings my husband and I had worked so hard to build just frivolously. So my initial budget was $50,000, and I wanted to stay within that budget, but I was buying all the materials and I was paying labor separately, and subcontracting it in for each piece. So like it starts, you need a framer. So then the framer comes, they frame it, you pay that
Mm-hmm.
person. Then the next thing you need is an electrician. It steps in like a regular traditional house once the trailer is built, really. But you want to make sure you're certifying along the way. That's very important. So I was lucky enough to partner with someone that got my house certified because you don't want Uncle Bob to build it and try to take it down the road. So, make a reasonable budget. Mine was $50,000, but that didn't include any of the inside stuff, the furnishings or any of that. Subcontracting, and this was during the pandemic when wood prices doubled. So I remember
Mm-hmm.
paying $8, $9 for $12 for a 2 by 10. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that is probably why the builder got into trouble is because the pandemic happened and he was struggling to get labor and he was struggling to get, the prices just jumped up too high and he had already negotiated contracts. So I think I went over budget. I probably went over budget by probably $7 or $8,000. I'm not going to lie. I probably ended up right around 58, 59. If I add all of the things I needed inside, the water heater, the appliances, the bedding and all of that, I probably landed somewhere around 65, 60, 65. And that's
Okay.
because I did it myself. If I went to a builder to build my house, and we know many, I'm sure it would probably be somewhere upwards of 80, 90 to $100,000 for what I have now.
Absolutely. And I'll share the link to the video from last week. That is exactly what I talked about, determining your budget and determining whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're doing a hybrid, a part of it you're doing yourself and you're working with contractors, or a full tiny house build, and how the things that you need to factor in as you're considering putting your budget together. All of those things impacted location. And I also spoke to the fact that financial climate. Are you in a recession? And as you spoke about with the pandemic, I know, I when I was building this add-on space, it was during the pandemic and the supply chain issues, and I was paying $75 for panels of OSB that I know when I built my tiny house cost $25. And so had I been building a tiny, a larger space at that time, it'll completely have blown my budget out of the water, because I know I was paying three times for those OSB panels that I had paid, a few years ago. So it is all, timing is also going to impact budget, and there's a lot that has to be considered in the budget. So thank you for sharing that information. Um, Let me see if there are any other questions that I want to or did I ask you, did we talk about, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about? And this is a good point. Yes, and I talked about this in the video, that you budget, no matter how hard you try to be on budget, you have to plan for overage. You're never going to hit your budget right on target, and so experts say you should plan to have at least 20 to 30% overage to cover that budget. Absolutely.
One thing I
um
wanted to add is very important, Jewel, is that as you buy things, because you're going to make especially if you're subcontracting and you're like going to Lowe's or Home Depot for your supplies and not doing it from a wholesale standpoint, but you need to track every screw you buy, everything. So anytime I used one card that I was using to buy my materials, and I kept a good accounting, because that stuff adds up, and you don't realize, all of the parts that have to go into it, how that can get away with from you if you're not tracking it.
right.
So you definitely have to get a good budget and keep every single receipt, so that you can account for it later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. What else? Any other topics you want to talk about that I didn't talk about? Questions I didn't ask you that you wanted to share about your
I
journey,
mean,
your story?
I think no, actually, Jewel, I just want to thank you for just providing this platform for all of us that are interested in tiny houses. I think we covered a lot of the things that we wanted to today. Mainly that, I mean, we didn't know each other, that part, and how you just showed up. I'm just so grateful that there's people in this space that are doing the right thing. And I think largely as a whole, like I said, Scottsdale Tiny House Fest, and everybody was wonderful. I had so many people come into my home and congratulate me, and very positive vibes there in that community now. And I'm definitely seeing a lot of change. It was felt very inclusive, so I'm excited about that. My goal in the future is try to maybe do this on a larger scale. We'll see. I've got some projects in mind that I'm working on, and I hope we'll be able to come back and talk with you about that when we're ready.
Absolutely. I would love to have you back to talk about the work that you're doing when it comes together. Absolutely. I know personally know that you're working on some beautiful things, and so I want you to have an opportunity to share it. So tell people where they can find you. Again, I've seen people ask about it in the comments. I will share this information in the description, but I always give my guests an opportunity to share their contact information, that where people can find them, social media, email, whatever it is, however you want people to be able to contact you and support you.
Well, actually, if you have a question that's something you just want to see if you can get a quick answer to, or you have a desire, you'll be in the Phoenix area and you may want to experience being at one of our beautiful reservoirs, you just email Tiny House Adventures AZ. That's Tiny House Adventures altogether AZ at gmail.com.
All right. And then on Instagram, you are Tiny House Adventures.
Tiny House Adventures underscore AZ. And you can see the beautiful pictures that I have there. Um, I had a family brunch recently with my family, and I'll be honest with you, that alone was worth the $50,000 budget, just to have my family up there. My grandchildren were jet skiing. My son was making lemon ricotta pancakes and Crown Royal French toast
Oh,
and
that
shrimp and
sounds
grits.
delicious.
We called every wild burro in the camp over to our site, and he was licking the remnants of what was left from the Blackstone. So
That
You'll
sounds
see our pictures
that
on
sounds
there.
beautiful. I am glad you are
Priceless.
having this opportunity, and that is absolutely priceless. I remember riding around looking at that area and at that time just envisioning that you'd have your tiny house up there. And so now to get to watch your journey and to hear you talk about it and as you experience it, it is it's an absolutely beautiful thing. And I'm so excited for you and many congratulations to you.
Thank you. And you too,
Yeah.
Jewel. We'll be in touch. We'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. Always. We always keep in touch just to chit chat and see what each other has going on. Um, so I thank you all very much for joining. I am going to if I change my screen to the right screen. Hang on a
Bye,
minute.
sisters. Those are
Huh?
my sisters.
I
I
know.
was
Let
saying
me.
bye to the sisters. They're going to kill me.
All right, here we go. Oh, let me
All
do
right.
it again. Oh my goodness. So there we go. I finally got it. One of these days, I'm going to be a pro at this. I'm going to practice. So again, I thank you all very much for joining us this Sunday afternoon. Lynn, I thank you so much for joining your early time to have this conversation, to share your story. Again, all of Lynn's contact information will be in the video description. If you're in the area and want to experience her tiny house, all of that information will be there. Thank you, Randolph. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for joining. But again, this has been one of the conversations on intimate spaces. Every Sunday, I do offer live content. I alternate between these conversations and the "What's Your Question" segment, where I am sharing answers to frequently asked questions. I also answer questions that might come up in the chat. And so, if you have questions, that is a good time for you to join us and get those questions answered. Join these segments so that you can hear other people's journeys and get some tips and tricks and help hopefully encourage yourself. So again, be sure if this video was helpful to you, I always ask that you like it, you share it, and you tell your friends about it. And then also be sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notifications so that you'll know when content is available. And so I wish you all a very great Sunday. Lynn, hang on just a second. Don't hang up. I hope everyone has a great Sunday, and thank you so much for joining us today.